Hey there, and thanks for joining me. Welcome to my place. We're going to be doing a great little tank build today with a 20 long and some Red Dragon Guppies. So stay tuned. Let's check it out. So this group of Red Dragon Guppies spent the majority of 2025 summer outside. They went out in the spring around April, and I brought them in at the end of September. They came inside to a rescaped tank that ended up just being a failed tank with very low growth from the plants and no real reason why. It went through a couple different lights, but it should have grown well, and it didn't. This tank had 3 big chunks of elephant skin stone, which is a type of limestone which will actually break down over time, raising the GH, the KH, and the overall pH of the tank, which is going to be beneficial to this group of Red Dragon Guppies, as well as this huge colony of red cherry shrimp. Like I was saying, this tank had failed before, and there was algae growing all over these rocks. For some reason I'm not totally sure. I did a little research, but there's no reason why the algae should have stayed on the rocks with its growth. So my hypothesis is that perhaps this tank needed better flow. So about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I had installed this internal filter preemptively because I knew that we were going to be doing a rescape or redo of this tank in the future. So that filter has been running. It's a great little NiCrew filter, low wattage, so it doesn't cost very much to run, but it gives really good flow and a little bit of filtration to this tank. So now we've come up to the time for a redo of this tank. It was not producing the plant growth that it needed to hold back the algae, so that's what we're here for today. Now, as I'm tearing this tank down, I'm going to try to reuse as many of these plants as I can. And in the end, I was able to give the Anubias a little bath in hydrogen peroxide, but the rest of the plants were actually growing pretty decent considering they hadn't been under a light for over a month. And so I was able to repurpose all of those plants. In addition to the repurposed plants, I am taking some cuttings from some of my existing tanks here in my fish room, and that's what's going to end up populating this new tank. So as I tear this tank down, I'm being really careful not to disturb or damage any of these shrimp. There are a ton of them in here, and they've been reproducing rapidly. There's a lot of snails, and then a lot of these Red Dragon Guppies. All of these animals really benefit from the raised GH and KH that elephant skin stone is creating in the water in this tank. So I'm going to reuse these stones, and that's going to really give these guys exactly what they want to thrive. So you can see as I'm pulling all this stuff out, I threw these rocks into a 5-gallon bucket and put a lot of hydrogen peroxide in there. And I'm going to let those just soak there in that hydrogen peroxide for a good long while. Ended up being a few hours that they were in there. And that hydrogen peroxide is going to start eating away at that algae almost immediately. Like some sort of an acid or something. If you're new to aquariums, hydrogen peroxide is a great product to sterilize things. If you're tearing down a tank and rebuilding it, vinegar is good for that as well. But hydrogen peroxide, you can spray it actually on your plants. You can spray it on the rocks or the hardscape in your aquarium and then rinse it off pretty quickly, and it's not going to harm anything. So hydrogen peroxide is a great product for aquariums. Here we see it really doing a number on that algae on these rocks. As far as these elephant skin stones go, they're quite expensive, but they're not terribly hard to find. I can't remember where I came about these, if it was at a local fish store or if I just purchased them online and had them shipped to me. But either way, they're readily available out there. But again, keep in mind, they're going to raise some of your parameters, or rather change some of the parameters of your water. So always keep that in mind. In this case, with guppies and red cherry shrimp, that's going to work to their benefit because both the guppies and the shrimp like the harder water. My water here at my house is very soft, so adding that mineralization to it is only a benefit to my fish and my shrimp. Now, what we're going to do is install an under gravel filter in this tank before we put our substrate in, which is going to give us a nice gap at the bottom so that water, and most importantly, oxygen and nutrients as well, can flow down and contact our plant roots and give us really exceptional plant growth with very little effort and very little maintenance. So what we got here now is our 20 long cleaned up, and of course the glare's back because all my lights are on. It's all clean for the most part. I left a little algae on the back glass, but I've got my under gravel filter set up in here, and if you want to see how that goes, you can check out one of my other videos on under gravel filters right here. So our next step here is to get our substrate into our 20 long with this under gravel filter plate set up. And the substrate we're using today, and pardon the floor, it's very messy, is fired clay substrate. So I've got some fluorite mixed with fluorite dark, along with a little bit of calcined clay and akadama in there. No volcanic rock because I just ran out. So let's see if we can get that in there. So there we go with our substrate in. We've got about 2.5 to 3 inches. It's kind of piled up towards the back, so it's a little deeper. And so, yeah, let's start to get some rocks back in here. They've been soaking for about an hour. And honestly, with the amount of hydrogen peroxide I put in there, I think that'll be just fine. So let's start getting this thing set up, planted, and scaped. Now with these rocks, what I'm trying to do is find the best surface to look at because they're very interesting, but they have a lot of different surfaces to them, and I hit them with a little bit of a wire brush to knock some of that algae that's dying off of them. So let's get them set up in there. So here we go with our rock hardscape in there. I had to rearrange these a few times and really analyze each rock to get the best face pointing out. And I actually look at it from about this angle most of the time. So it gives a cool little perspective in there with the substrate banked up towards the back. So now let me get the background on before we go too far, and then we'll get some water in there and get this thing planted. Now, when you're setting up an under gravel filter like this, essentially you are making the entire substrate system into one large mechanical and biological filter. The fired clay substrates that I'm using in this tank will grow a ton of beneficial bacteria, which will remove harmful fish waste from the water and transform it into a product that the plants can grow very healthy from. Those clay substrates will soak in nutrients from the water and slowly release them back to your plants at a rate that they can process, creating huge plant growth in a very low maintenance aquarium. So now I'm into the planning stage of this tank, and it's very hard to see. This is exceptionally hard to video in the corner of my fish room over there. Just the logistics of it was not easy to work around. So I'm planting the tank with, again, plants that I salvaged from the old tank and cuttings from some of these other ones. We've got a variety of Ludwigias in there, 3 or 4 different varieties. We've got some Rotalas, and we've got some Bacopa in there. Now, after the fact, I came back and put a couple more plants in there, and I think it really adds to the overall feel. It turned out to be a very beautiful tank. Now, here we are with the hang on the back filter that's just pulling some of the dust out of the water that's always left over from these fired clay substrates. You saw me washing these fired clay substrates earlier, which is a mix of fluorite dark and just regular fluorite. In my experience, it's almost impossible to wash them completely clean. You have to kind of get a little filter floss and a hang on the back or an internal filter or canister, whatever you want to use, to pull that fine particleization out of your water right after the install, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. The internal filter combined with the undergravel filter will do everything that we need as far as mechanical and biological filtration. I did add some API quick start to this system. That's going to give us a little jump start on the beneficial bacteria, but keep in mind, all of these plants were in tanks before, so they're all coated in beneficial bacteria, as well as the internal filter has been running for several weeks. And there we are, about an hour after we did our planning. We've got some Cardinalis back there, a lot of Ludwigia, probably 3 or 4 different varieties of Ludwigia in there. The needle leaf Ludwigia back there in the back. Rotala red, Rotala green. We got some Bacopa back there that'll grow in. And a couple little Anubias plants. I tried to stick one in the shade there. They won't grow very fast, so they'll tend to attract algae. We got a lot of snails already in there that we're tagging along with things, and ones that I collected. Let's get our fish up and get them released. Now here we come back a few days later. I've got a few more plants added to this system, and it really looks beautiful. It's got the F-Zone bright light, which is actually running at about 50% because it is absolutely bright. The F-Zone lights are great. Runs off an app. You don't have to have a separate timer, so that's really nice. As you can see, the fish and the shrimp are quite happy and quite active in this setup. And most of these shrimp are still working really hard at picking out all of the dying algae off of those rocks. I've come in here several times and the rocks have just been coated with little cherry shrimp. So thanks for joining me today. If you like my video, please subscribe to my channel. That's the way that I get to come and hang out with you in this digital space, and you get to come here and hang out with me. And I sure do appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me on this little tank build, and I will see you again on the next one.